Hey guys, I'm back, and today I'm going to review a new release called Huracan. It is written, directed, and starring Cassius Corrigan, and it's about an aspiring mixed martial arts fighter who suffers from dissociative identity disorder. Now, this is a mental disorder that used to be called multiple personality disorder, and just most recently I saw there was like a scandal with a YouTube creator called Trisha Paytas who claimed that she suffers from DID and that she has like alter personalities that come and go, and that's one of the main contributors to like her dysfunctional life. She got a lot of criticism online for saying that she had dissociative identity disorder because people tend to know Trisha Paytas as being a kind of internet troll, and I think that they didn't want her kind of antics online to be associated with what should be taken seriously as a mental disease. Um, but anyway, that's kind of just a side issue. My real purpose for today's upload is to share some of my thoughts about this film, Huracan. The first thing that really kind of captivated me about the film is how amazing it is that Cassius Corrigan really has an auteur's stamp all the way across this film. It's really his vision. So not only did he actually write the screenplay, but he, like I mentioned, directed the film and plays the central part of Alonso Santos. So it's about a guy who's a fighter and he's training to be an MMA champion. But we know that there's some like dark past that is haunting him, and we're not quite sure really what happened. We know that he's just got out of prison, presumably for violent behavior that disturbed the peace. And now he's very much being held to account by the state, and his parole officer and the system is keeping a close eye on him. He has to regularly have drug checks. He has to wear a tag. He is like constantly having to self-assess every single day. And the drama of it is that we know that he is clearly suffering from something and that he's been misdiagnosed in the past, but he's trying to figure out what exactly his condition is and how, what type of treatment he might be able to receive to get better. So we see him going to these meetings with Isabella, and she's a psychotherapist. But what's really special about this film is that this is the first ever film to actually cinematically depict EMDR, which is a very special kind of therapy. It's very specific. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And this character of Isabella, that's her role in the film. She administers EMDR to Alonso. And the idea is that he is compelled to speak about his past traumas, something connected with his mother being caught up in a domestic violence situation where she's being physically, sexually, and verbally abused by her intimate partner. And, Alonso being just a little kid and witnessing the horrors of his mother being abused. And this has had a very negative impact on his psychological development. It's led to a lot of his fears and anxieties, and presumably what has also caused him to develop what is called dissociative identity disorder, the formation of more than one personality that sometimes comes out. So the treatment involves him recalling that trauma, but as he's speaking about those painful events from the past, he's being also called to follow like a kind of flickering light that moves, back and forth. And the eye movement in connection with the recalling of painful events is proposed to kind of reorder like his brain activity so that it compartmentalizes the past in the past for the person. I know that EMDR is also used for people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very different from dissociative identity disorder. But the idea is that in both cases, these are illnesses that emerge from a dysfunctional response to trauma in the past. And so the idea is that the sufferer in both instances feels like they're still being affected by the past as if it were the present. So they haven't successfully like tucked away the pain of the past, kind of like neatly stored it somewhere in their mind so that it no longer bothers them. In both instances, the past lingers and haunts the individual very much in the present moment. Like they feel very much affected by what happened and respond as if this was like happening right now. Like the fear and the danger is clear and present. It hasn't been resolved. So the idea of EMDR is to kind of reclassify the past in the mind so that we no longer have like a present day response to it as if it were a real danger and threat. So that being said, Yara Martinez, by the way, who plays the therapist, Isabella, she's amazing. I really liked the way that she was depicted because she was shown to be like a real human who is responsible for helping Alonso, but she also had, her own troubles and her own family history and her own motivations for pursuing this line of work. So I really like that aspect of the story. And you can tell that character of Isabella really cared for Alonso. Like she desperately was hoping that he could get some relief from his mental illness. So while he's getting this therapy for his dissociative identity disorder, which had previously been misdiagnosed as bipolar and other things, he decides to also pursue his goal of becoming an MMA champion. So he goes to this training center and tries to get the attention of a person who seems to be like a very eminent coach in the MMA world. Like he is a very sought after trainer and someone who really like wants to develop winners. And he presents himself as a viable candidate for coaching. And what emerges in the practices is that when Alonso steps into the ring, something kind of takes over him. Like the cinematography, by the way, which is stunning as well. I forgot to mention the name of the cinematographer. It's Mike McGowan. Huge props to him because he really built a compelling world, like a really captivating world in the film. The cinematography and the kind of editing effects and the camera work that are used to suggest that a disturbance is taking place inside Alonso's mind, they really draw the audience in. I'm not an MMA fan. Like I've never watched a single mixed martial arts fight. I've never been interested in following those kind of matches or anything like that. The idea of that kind of violent sport doesn't really appeal to me that much. But this was a very watchable movie because of the psychological component. You really get inside Alonso's head. And Cassius Corrigan is a really good actor. Like, he is really watchable, really sincere, really authentic. And you just get inside his mind and you kind of feel every punch with him. And it's a very expressionist type of filmmaking that really locates the film viewer inside of his mind. So we're fully experiencing this from his perspective, being in the ring. But what's really interesting is that the emergence of this alter personality kind of is tied in with the fight. So this other personality is actually being given a name by Alonso. He calls him Huracan, which is also of course the name of the film. And Huracan in Spanish means hurricane. And of course, a hurricane is kind of like a very overwhelming, dramatic weather event, that kind of sweeps everything up in its path. Hurricanes are very common in Florida, which is where this story is set. We can find ourselves feeling as people bearing witness to what's happening to Alonso, as also people who are kind of caught up in this hurricane of this other personality. How it suddenly like descends upon us and we feel like we can't get out of it. It's all encompassing, and it's difficult to find a hideaway from this. We very much get swept up in it. And that is what's happening to Alonso. When this other character takes over, it's usually in connection with a fight that he's involved in. And we kind of start to see little glimpses of him appear. And the film suggests that in little splices of almost like disorientation or depersonalization or derealization. Like, it feels like he's having a psychotic episode. He can't tell what's real and what's not. And he feels starting to kind of divorce from his own body, which is also an explanation for why he'd previously been misdiagnosed as a schizophrenic. Like, that doesn't fully capture like the symptoms that feature in his disorder. It's really about another personality kind of forcefully taking over, dominating over his central personality of Alonso. And Huracan is the one who kind of is, I guess, triggered in the ring. And he's just an animal. He is a fierce, savage killer. And when the coach sees this other side of Alonso, like this vicious fighter that is indestructible in the ring, he wins matches. When the coach sees that, rather than kind of sensitively approach the athlete and kind of make sure that he's okay and that kind of just check in with him, instead he sees the potential for a champion, and he wants to capitalize on that. He wants to maximize, the factors that could contribute to that savage beast reemerging in the ring, at whatever cost, at the cost of Alonso's mental health. So we now see this kind of interesting tug of war between two very influential people in Alonso's life. His coach, who kind of wants to let the beast loose, encourage the emergence of the beast, and really let Huracan loose to win fights. And on the other hand, there's his therapist, who is really kind of pragmatic, actually, about this multiple personality situation. She's very realistic. She doesn't tell Alonso that he can magically get rid of his alter, that he can magically dispose of Huracan. Rather, she wants to kind of like promote more of a mindfulness approach so that he can safely and maybe functionally merge these two personalities into one so that he can regain control whenever Huracan emerges. She's kind of promoting a method of like co-consciousness so that he can, rather than try and kind of completely eradicate this kind of shadow side, this other dark personality, instead what might be healthier is if Alonso successfully integrates the shadow, integrates Huracan, this crazy, insane killer, into his personality, and finds, strategic ways of coping and actually maintaining and commanding control over what could be really destructive. So she has a much more kind of clear-headed, sensible approach, to Huracan, whereas Alonso's coach is, he just sees dollar signs. Like, he just thinks, wow, we can really go far with this. This is a killing machine, and we need to kind of feed the beast. I want this to be a kind of spoiler-free review because at the heart of it, lots of dramatic events happen that propel the narrative forward, and I don't want to kind of spoil that experience for you. It's worth watching, but I did want to kind of like flag this movie on the psychological films landscape and in the kind of community of people who like to keep up with films that portray and depict mental illness, and to kind of really encourage you to go and see this film, not just because it's a really great accomplishment by Cassius Corrigan and his vision, but also because it does promote EMDR, which is a fairly new treatment and has a pretty impressive success rate for people who have disorders that emerge from trauma. And just make sure that it's on your radar, really. And that's it for now. I'll be uploading again soon. Take care. Bye.